Rain poured as she slammed her palms on the tinted window, her breath fogging up the glass. "Please see broken bar, can I hide in your car?" Her voice shook, soaked in fear and desperation. Her mascara ran down her face, mixing with rain and tears. For a second, there was no response. Then, a shadow moved inside, and the lock clicked open. She didn't think twice. She jumped in, gasping, clutching her bruised arm, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the thunder outside. The man behind the wheel said nothing. He simply drove, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. The silence felt heavier than the storm. She could feel danger radiating from him, the kind that doesn't need words to be understood. But she was too tired to care. All she wanted was to be far from the man who had destroyed her peace. Minutes passed before she found her voice again. "Thank you, broken bar, I just needed to get away," she whispered, her hands trembling. The man didn't respond. The glow of the dashboard lights revealed sharp featureless eyes that looked like they'd seen too much, lips pressed into a thin line, a scar tracing his jaw. Something about him made her uneasy. She turned her face toward the window, watching the rain race down the glass. It wasn't until they reached a quiet street that he finally spoke. "Who are you running from?" His voice was deep, calm, but there was a weight behind it. She hesitated. "My ex," she said softly. "He broken bar, he doesn't let go." The man's hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. "Name?" he asked. She told him, and for a brief second, his expression changed. He slowed the car, pulled to the side, and turned toward her. In the dim light, she saw recognition flash in his eyes. "Your ex-broken bar owes me a lot of money," he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. She stared at him, realization washing over her. "Your broken bar," she whispered, voice cracking. "You're the one he talked about to the man he feared." He didn't deny it. "And now," he said, "you're sitting in my car." Her heart raced, panic rising again. She reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped her. "Relax. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have opened the door." She froze, unsure whether to trust him. The rain kept falling outside, like the world itself was holding its breath. "What do you want from me?" she asked. He sighed, looking out into the storm. "Nothing," he said. "You just reminded me of someone I once tried to save." His tone carried something she didn't expect, a pain. He started the car again and drove toward the city's edge. After a while, exhaustion took over, and she fell asleep against the cold window. He glanced at her briefly, the faint reflection of her bruised face stirring something deep inside him as something human. The next morning, she woke up in a mansion she didn't recognize. The scent of coffee filled the air. She stepped outside the room, her bare feet brushing against marble floors. The man was in the kitchen, reading the newspaper like nothing unusual had happened. "You're safe here," he said without looking up. "For now." She didn't know whether to thank him or run. But when she tried to leave, his mother appeared from another room, a frail woman with kind eyes. "You must be hungry, dear," she said gently. "Sit, eat." There was warmth in her voice, a warmth the girl hadn't felt in years. Over time, she began helping around the house, cooking, cleaning, even reading to the old woman in the evenings. The mansion, though guarded and silent, started to feel strangely like home. Days turned into weeks. She learned that the man whose name was Rafael had once lost his wife and daughter in a car crash caused by his enemies. Since then, he had become colder, harder, building walls that no one dared to cross. But with her presence, small changes began to show. He smiled sometimes, faintly. He asked about her past, about her dreams. She told him she used to paint before her ex destroyed everything she owned. "You should start again," he said one night. She laughed softly. "In your world, there's no room for colors." He looked at her then, his gaze softer than she'd ever seen. "Maybe that's exactly what my world needs. But peace never lasts long in a life built on violence." One night, headlights flashed outside the mansion gates. It was her ex, furious, desperate, armed. Raphael's men surrounded the property, but before they could act, she stepped out to face her past. "You ruined me," her ex shouted. "You ran to him, the man who owns me." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I ran to live." Before she could say more, he aimed his gun, but Raphael was faster. The shot echoed, followed by silence. She turned, trembling, only to see Raphael on the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. He had taken the bullet meant for her. She fell to her knees beside him, sobbing. "Why would you do that?" she cried. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes held peace. "Because you reminded me what family feels like," he whispered. The sirens came later, the police, the Causa, but she barely heard any of it. She stayed by his side until the ambulance lights faded into the distance. In the days that followed, she couldn't sleep. She painted again this time, a portrait of him smiling faintly, holding his mother's hand. The mansion felt empty without his quiet presence, but she carried his words with her like a promise. He had given her safety, hope, and a reason to believe that even the darkest hearts can find light again. Months later, she opened a small art studio in the city. On the wall hung a simple plaque that read, "For the man who taught me that even in broken worlds, kindness can survive." People came, admired her paintings, and sometimes asked about the man in the portrait. She only smiled and said, "He saved me by reminding me what love really means." In her heart, she knew that somewhere, in whatever place souls go after redemption, Raphael was finally at peace here because he had found what power, money, and revenge never gave him, forgiveness. And through her, his story continued not as a tale of fear, but as one of love, sacrifice, and second chances. Days turned into an uneasy calm. The mansion that once felt like a prison of silence slowly began to feel like shelter. She spent her mornings cooking for the old woman upstairs, Raphael's mother, who spoke softly and called her child. The woman's kindness reminded her of the mother she'd lost years ago. For the first time in so long, she felt safe. The bruises on her skin had faded, but the ones on her heart still ached. Sometimes, she'd catch Raphael standing at the balcony, looking out into the city lights, a cigarette in hand, his expression unreadable. She never asked what he thought about. Maybe he didn't even know himself. But something in his eyes had changed since the night he let her in. The coldness had softened, and though he never said it, she knew he was fighting something inside between the man he had become and the man he once was. In the evenings, she'd play old records for his mother, filling the house with gentle music. Raphael would pass by occasionally, pretending not to listen, but she could see how the melodies quieted the storms inside him. They shared small moments, simple conversations over tea, soft laughter when the old woman dozed off mid-story. For a man like him, laughter was rare, and she cherished every flicker of it. One night, he found her painting again, sitting by the window, brush in hand. "You still do that?" he asked quietly. She smiled, not looking up. "It's the only thing that makes me feel like myself." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Keep doing it," he said. "Don't let anyone take that from you again." She met his eyes, surprised by the warmth in his voice. That was the night she began to believe that even a man surrounded by darkness could still carry light inside him. But peace never lasts forever. The past always finds a way back, and hers came crashing in like thunder. It happened late one evening. She was in the kitchen when the sound of engines echoed outside the mansion gates. She froze. The guards rushed out, their shouts mixing with the sound of rain. When Raphael appeared, his face was hard again, cold, focused, dangerous. "Stay inside," he ordered, but she knew. Her ex had found her. Fear gripped her chest as she watched from the window. The gates burst open, and there he was, the man she had once loved, now unrecognizable. Drunk, furious, desperate. "You think you can hide from me?" he yelled. "You think you can run to him?" Raphael stepped forward, his men behind him. "You'll leave her alone," he said, his voice low and sharp like a blade. Her ex laughed bitterly. "She's mine. You don't get to take what belongs to me." The words made her stomach twist. She stepped out despite Raphael's warning, rain soaking her clothes. "I don't belong to you," she shouted, her voice breaking. For a moment, everything went silent. Her ex raised his gun. She froze, heart pounding, unable to move. But before she could even scream, Raphael moved. A single gunshot split the air. She screamed his name, but it wasn't her ex who fell. Raphael staggered, the weapon slipping from his grasp, blood blooming across his shirt. He had taken the bullet meant for her. Her knees gave out as she rushed to him, her hands shaking. "No, no, no," she cried, pressing her hands against his wound. The rain mixed with his blood, running down the driveway like red rivers. His eyes met hers, soft, calm, almost peaceful. "Why would you do that?" she sobbed. His lips trembled as he whispered, "You reminded me, broken bar, what family feels like." Those words tore through her. He had spent years surrounded by fear, loyalty bought with blood, and power built on pain, but in her, he had found something pure, something worth saving. The sirens came minutes later, flashing lights cutting through the darkness. The police, the ambulance, the chaos, it all blurred together. She held his hand as they took him away, her tears falling faster than the rain. In that moment, she realized something she had never seen before: redemption doesn't always come through forgiveness or prayer. Sometimes, it comes through sacrifice. And Raphael had given everything just to protect her. In the hospital, she sat outside the room for hours, staring at the floor, praying he would open his eyes. But fate wasn't kind that night. The doctor came out, eyes heavy. She didn't need to hear the words she already knew. The world went quiet. Days later, the mansion felt like a ghost house. His mother cried softly, holding the girl's hand. "He wasn't always like this," she whispered. "He just forgot how to be good." The girl nodded, tears streaming silently. She knew he hadn't died a monster. He had died a man who finally remembered his heart. She buried him in the garden beside a small pond where he used to stand at night, smoking in silence. On his grave, she placed a single painting, a portrait she had finished before the shooting. It showed him not as a boss, not as a criminal, but as the man who had once smiled in the glow of morning light. Weeks passed. She could have left the mansion, but she stayed. She cared for his mother, kept the house alive, and continued to paint. Each brushstroke carried a memory of him, his voice, his silence, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing left worth protecting. Sometimes, she'd whisper to the air, "You saved me, but I wish I could have saved you too." The city moved on, rumors faded, but his name still carried power. Only she knew that power meant nothing to him at the end. What he wanted wasn't control or fear. It was peace. Months later, she opened a small art studio in the city. The first painting she hung on the wall was of a rain-soaked night and a black car parked under flickering streetlights. The night everything changed. People would often ask her about it, and she would just smile and say, "That was the night I met the man who taught me what love really means." She never mentioned who he was or what he did. Some stories are meant to stay between souls. And in her heart, she knew Raphael had finally found his peace, not in the empire he built, but in the life he gave to save hers. Sometimes, late at night, when the rain fell just like it did that evening, she'd close her eyes and remember his voice. "You reminded me what family feels like." Those words became her strength. They reminded her that love can grow even in the darkest places, that redemption is never too far for those willing to sacrifice, and that sometimes, the most broken people are the ones who love the hardest. And though he was gone, his memory lived on in every color she painted, every heartbeat she carried forward. Because in saving her, Raphael had done more than protect a life, he had rewritten his own ending.